Have you been reading any comics lately?
A little bit. I mean, I've been working on my own stuff. I've been bouncing around a little bit. But you're not. I'm not terribly exciting when it comes to new stuff. I don't even. We had two comic stores here by me, and they both closed. So I wind up buying. I wind up reading a lot of reprints. A lot of. I'm really into the Kirby stuff from the '70s. This horror stuff from the Demon and Forever People and just obscure shit. Gene Cole and Daredevil, I like a lot. I started getting into that a little bit. But the Barry Windsor Smith Weapon X stuff. So this is all old stuff, though. You know,
That's
the
all right.
the
Old comics are what
yeah.
got
Okay,
us
if
into
that
comics, though, right?
counts, I thought you want like what's the current stuff because I'm old. I like the old stuff, and I find sometimes it's cool to when you find stuff like I like different guys for different stuff. But Barry Windsor Smith did a real cool independent run on Rune. I think he's a vampire kind of guy. I forget what that was. I discovered that. I rediscovered that. I was reading. Um,
That came out from Malibu, right?
yeah, Malibu. Yeah. Alex is really into the Neil Adams stuff from continuity, not continuity. I'm sorry, from continuity when Neil Adams had his own company, and he's got into collecting all that. And my buddy Chris, who buys a lot of long boxes, uh, he sent me all that megalith and and some of it is good and some of it's really good, the art, and then some of it's kind of I don't know. So if that covers it, I've been reading a little bit of Marcus Aurelius too, Meditations, but that's not comics. So
That's all right. It's very sophisticated, Sal.
no, not really. It's good stuff because he's just basically tells you not to worry about all the bullshit in your life, which is kind of it's small, lots of quotes, kind of stuff. But every Italian guy recommends it, or especially when he's in prison, everybody gets into Marcus Aurelius. So I always was like curious. I'm like, okay, he was the emperor of Rome, and yet he was this really smart guy, or really philosophical dude. So I started reading some of that, but comic wise, I still bounce around with all the old stuff, man. You know.
No, I mean, we talk about that a lot on the podcast where, sometimes we're excited about new stuff, but sometimes now we're at the age where we get just as excited about rereading old stuff. And again, those are the books that made us love comics in the first place. So they earn their place.
No, no, I agree. I think it's like you got a family, and you're not the guy you were 5 years ago. You're not the guy you were 10 years ago. And I think just like with music or with movies, there's books I've read before, and you read them now, and they're kind of you see different things. You rediscover them, so to speak. Like Iron Fist. I like them when they're in the masterworks because you read it from the first to the and I forgot I hadn't read Iron Fist since I was a kid, and it came out, and so it's not, there's certain things you just rediscover.
Yeah, that I had actually forgotten all about Rune until you mentioned it, and I loved that book. And I mean, who doesn't love Barry Windsor Smith, right?
Yeah,
And like I don't know if you watched the X-Men, the new X-Men
I
97
haven't. I
cartoon.
haven't. No, no, I haven't.
Well, there's an episode where, of course, Storm and Forge, meet, and then of course those issues of X-Men were drawn by Barry Windsor Smith. It's
Right,
a
right.
classic chunk, and it's
Yeah,
just
yeah,
so I was just thinking about. I watched that episode last night, and I was like, oh, I want to go reread those Barry Windsor Smith
yeah.
comics.
It's
So it's funny that
amazing.
you say that.
Yeah, the little short run he did on Iron Man too is like that. It's beautiful stuff. I mean, the art is fantastic. The Wolverine run is one of my favorites. I think it's Weapon X. I don't think it's called
Yep.
Wolverine. Yeah, and Jr. did a really nice run on Weapon X too. I want to say I can't remember if that was the title of it, but I remember John Romita Jr. did a really good run on Wolverine. And you know what else I rediscovered it's Punisher versus Batman that Jr. did that gets lost.
Oh yeah.
Amazing art. I mean, it got lost because it was right in the period of time when comics were very, You know, there was a lot of people buying them just because they thought that they were investments. It was during that whole speculative time. But for me, one of my favorite pieces of work that JR did was Batman versus Punisher. I mean, it's just kind of like a Kirby kind of issue where they just kick the shit out of each other for a whole issue. But and I think it kind of got lost. You know, a lot of people didn't really buy it because they thought it was kind of just a marketing thing, and it's really kind of stupid, but it's really good. I mean, it's so, and it's hard to find, but if you ever see it, and I wish they would reprint it, but they probably won't because you got to get DC and Todd together, or whatever, you know. But that's another one I found. I was going through some boxes, and I'm like, man, this is really good. And Jr. is a really sweet guy. So
Oh, he's super nice. I remember running into him. It was, I don't know, 93 or 94 at a convention here in Philly. And of course, the Frank Miller and JR Man Without Fear miniseries was coming
yeah,
out. I don't know if
yeah,
it had finished or it had just started or whatever,
yeah,
but he was there promoting that book. And I happened to walk past, as we were walking down the aisle, I was walking past him. So he wasn't at his table. And I didn't want to bother him, but I just said, hey, man, your work is stunning on this series. And he was like, he looked at me like, I can't, you really think that? You mean it? And he was so sweet to me, whether or not he was being sincere or humble
yeah,
or whatever.
yeah, yeah.
He came off as so pleasant. And that like hit me all the way, all those years ago. And,
He's great. He's the
I'll
best.
always remember
He's
it.
the best. I mean, some guys you know you say it or you think it, but I don't know anybody that doesn't like Jr. And I I I I've been fortunate enough to get really drunk with him a few times, and he's a sweet guy, even when he's drunk. So we were getting thrown out of a bar one time, him and I, and on our way out, while the guy was throwing us out, he asked Jr. for a Spider-Man head, and he did it. He gave it to him. The guy was throwing us out, and he gave him he did a Spider-Man head, and I said, yeah, I won't tell you what I told him to draw, but I told him, I said, you cannot be giving this guy a Spider-Man sketch, you know, while he's throwing us out. And he's like, yeah, sure, why not? You know, we're like, it was the funniest thing. It was like a circle with two eyes.
You said that your comic book store is closed. Do you ever make it into comic shops at all?
Well, I used to go in. I live in Oak Park now, which is kind of it's not that far. It's like maybe 9, 10 miles outside of Chicago. And when my mother was still living, I used to go in to see her, you know, a couple times a week. And the comic store was on the way home. The comic store that I always went to was Chicago Comics on Clark and Belmont. It's right in Wrigleyville. And what I loved about it was they've got a huge. It's a great store because he's got a whole back room of just indie books, and then the front is all the Marvel, DC, and you know Image and I got to tell you, man. I got to be honest, Brian. As you get older, you just get set in your ways and you get lazy and you get your own habits. I just don't make it into the city as often as I used to because your routine changes. The guy out here by me was kind of a throwback, you know, where you walked in and the place was a shithole and it was messy and the guy was crabby. And if you asked him a question, I don't know, man, I don't read this shit. You know, he's one of those guys. He was a throwback to the comic star guys we grew up with. And so I quit going because I'm not kidding. You went in and the place was always a pit. So a couple of young guys tried to open. So I think he just lived there. I don't even know if it was a comic store. I think he just basically, you know, I think he was a cop in the back, and then you know he just was like, whatever. The comics were in the front, just so you know people wouldn't rob him. So they thought he was crazy. And then they opened this young couple young guys opened the store, and it didn't last long. I mean, it was in a bad spot for it because there was nowhere to park and blah blah blah. But no, they're kind of dried up, and there's still plenty out here. I can't complain. I mean, if I wanted to go to a comic store, I'd have to drive 15 minutes. It's no big deal. I'm not the old guy like, oh, it's I used to buy them under the L, and I used to buy them at the drugstore. No, I'm not that guy. But when you get a favorite comic store, you gotta. It makes all the difference because you like to just you know look at the back issues, look at the new stuff, look at the all the other trappings, and we don't have that anymore. There really aren't that many great comic stores in Chicago anymore. There's a couple. There's a few in Evanston now near Northwestern that I used to go to when I lived on the north side, but now I live way south. So, but it's kind of sad, that I don't have a haunt that I used to go to because I used to love to go to the comic store.
Yeah, I started going every Wednesday, and it's pretty fantastic now.
Yeah, you got
Yeah,
it
I'm
the
having a
same.
lot of fun, and there's a lot of good new books coming out.
You
Surprisingly, like
got the
I
same
went through a little.
store? Is it the same store you've always gone to, or is it a different store, a new store?
No, well, it's not the one that I used to work in and grew up with because I moved to Philly, and so it's a Philadelphia one. But it's the same one I've
Okay,
had here for 10 years, and it's a great store.
good.
They
Yeah,
have a
yeah,
huge selection and stuff.
yeah. Anybody coming through Chicago, Chicago Comics is fantastic, and then he's got an indie store called Quimby's, which is in Bucktown, but Wrigleyville, pseudo Wrigleyville, Belmont and Clark in Chicago. If you're ever in town, it's fantastic. I mean, it's the store that I read. Well, Challengers is really good too. I shouldn't knock the Challengers guys. Challengers in Bucktown on Western is a really good store. Those guys go out of their way to help indie promoters and help indie comic creators. They did a thing for me with the Hostage, and they did a thing for me with Atomica. So Patrick and those guys, God, I feel so bad I forgot about Challengers, but they're kind of, you know not in the same types of stores. Challengers, they go out of their way for indie guys, whereas comic book Chicago Comics is right in like the shitstorm of Wrigleyville.
Well, Sal, thank you so much for taking some time to join us. I really appreciate it.
Brian, anytime, man.